Assassin Rogue puts the ass in Assassination, and if you also want some ass, and by ass I mean fat 8.3 loot, then stay tuned for the talents, essences, gear rotation, and a whole lot of tips and tricks so you can start bleeding some bosses to death just like my dad did to my emotional stability. The guide will cover basics and fundamentals, and it will give you a solid start into one of the coolest melee specs in the game. Starting with the first row, take elaborate planning. This talent increases your damage dealt by 10% for 4 seconds each time you deliver a finishing move. Nothing complicated here. With the gear you will eventually get in 8.3, keeping this close to, if not 100% uptime, will be fairly consistent, making it a simple 10% extra damage dealt. Next up we have two options. The raid and essentially single target focused option will be Master Assassin. In a vacuum, kinda, this is the most damage you can get out of this row, but not by a large margin. Will help your logs though. You will want to rotate Vanish in your fight to take advantage of this plus other things, but otherwise it's a set and forget. The dungeon option is Subterfuge and also the one we recommend. Now, I did classify these two as raid and mythic plus options, but really, Subterfuge is mandatorily taken when you have the Shrouded Suffocation as right trait, which simply performs better in dungeons more than in raids. That doesn't mean you cannot use Subterfuge in raids also. The reason these pair up so nicely is because Shrouded Suffocation makes Stealth Cast Garrotes generate 3 combo points instead of 1 and deal more damage. Pair it with Subterfuge and you can essentially cast 3 Garrotes. Casting all 3 on the same target is not ideal, which is why in the grand scheme of things this trait is slightly worse in raids than in dungeons. Although with the number of targets and adds and cleave bosses, one could argue this fact as well. Third row is an energy management row. Right now Vigor is outperforming the other options, specifically Deeper Stratagem, which is another popular choice but not as much. Vigor is simple, more energy and energy regen. It's simple again and doesn't change your rotation or priority, which Stratagem does. We won't focus on it for this video, but hopping into the Ravenhold Discord for the details is something you can do after you have seen this video. Please. Fourth row is a survivability row with only one real good option at the moment, that being Cheat Death. This is essentially the talent that created the mechanic as something most classes have these days. When you would be hit by something that would kill you, you instead remain at 7% HP with 85% damage reduction for 3 seconds. This lets you survive mechanics that would normally kill people, and you can do this once every 6 minutes. Fifth tier brings crowd control options. The talents are all good with specific uses, but do not work on bosses since you cannot really CC them. As such, you pick them based on what you want to accomplish. Internal Bleeding transforms your kidney shot into a damage dealing ability as well, providing you with the most DPS on the row if your target can be stunned. Same argument applies to Iron Wire, which sees more use, particularly in dungeon when you can extend silences, especially playing with the Azurite trait I mentioned earlier. Prey on the Weak is much more situational, mostly used in raids if your group needs to burst down an ad that spawns and is also susceptible to CC. Level 90 currently sees only one viable option in Toxic Blade. This skill generates a combo point, adds a poison to the target, and increases the nature damage that target receives by 10%. Nature damage, being your poisons, for example, and in Venom. You essentially use it on cooldown and try to fit in as many envenoms in its window as you can, and also pray that Poison Bomb procs. What's Poison Bomb, you say? Well, that's an option on the last talent row that performs the best in raids and AoE alike. It does require the targets to stay in the poison puddle, which is hard to accomplish in situations where the tank has to move because he saw a shiny coin 10 yards yonder, just enough for the mobs to get out of your poison bomb, then magically stop moving for 2 fucking minutes while no other poison bombs will ever proc. This is a hidden passive of the talent that many do not know, but here at MarcelianOnline we add salt to your hopes and dreams. It's still good. The other options scale a bit poorly, where Crimson Tempest sees more plays these days, in high mythic keys at least. You want to pick this one when you know you can stay in an AoE fight for a long time, fighting at least 6 or more targets consistently. This happens in organized groups and high keys, otherwise Poison Bomb will do just fine. With a little bit of hope, BFA will be the last expansion where we will tell you to sim. What? What's simming, you say? It's basically people that want to do 1 to 5% extra damage. Listen, stats are fairly balanced this patch, but they are not all equal. To get the best results and experience out of your Sin Rogue, you need to sim your stats and or gear on websites such as RaidBots. But if that is too much of a chore, I get it, it is, then you can simply still follow a generally accepted priority. Haste followed by Mastery and then Critical Strike will be your best lineup for single target. Haste essentially helps with energy regeneration since it will be one of your main issues, not a big one, just one you could notice here and there. In AoE situations, you will have multiple targets poisoned that also have bleeds ticking on them, refunding you a lot of energy, so haste will not be as important. Instead, Critical Strike followed by Mastery and Versatility will be essentially higher in priority. Critical Strike, outside the obvious DPS benefits, will help you generate more combo points to help you spend the increase in energy quicker and dish out as many finishers as you can. When you choose your enchants, gems, and other consumables, you need to think of your stat priority. For the purpose of the guide, we will suggest a Cord of Haste and Quicksand Spinels for your most used consumables, but ideally you want to replace them with their crit counterpart, if you exclusively do dungeons or want more AoE damage in the end, of course. For weapons, you are in luck since you have 2 of them, enchants that is. Quick Navigation and Deadly Navigation will perform the best, but you can sim all other options since there are quite a few at this point. Still, can't go wrong with these 2. Greater Flask of the Currents will be ideal. Don't be a cheap shit like me and use the Inferior Flask, or be a cheeky bastard and use the Wad Flask since they have the same icon. Potion of Focus Resolve is the best option for up to 3 targets, while Impart Proximity works on larger AoE fights. Your food needs will be satisfied by baked potatoes for that haste. No, feasts will not be that great, and that should tell you something about agility as a stat. Sad thing is, in BFA, secondary stats are stronger for almost all classes. Assassination is one of the spec that relies the most on Azerite traits, where specific options can make or break your build. Until you manage to get your hands on all of the traits we will recommend, you will be a bit of a jack of all trades. As such, to become a master of single target, go with Double Dose stacked 3 times. This essentially works really well with Master Assassin, where you use your stealth buffs for huge mutilates. Add 1 nothing personal to the mix and you are set. The rest of the options should be filled with whatever sims better for you. Usually that's generic stat traits like Heart of Darkness and Blightborn Infusion. Keep in mind that Heart of Darkness only works if you have over 25 corruption, while Blightborn Infusion can only be found on Titan Residuum pieces since it's a Mythic Plus Azerite drop. The AoE build that's mostly used in Mythic dungeons focuses on stacking Echoing Blades 3 times with Shrouded Suffocation 3 times as well. This is a very specific set of Azerite pieces that could take a while to get. For any of the missing traits, you can fill in with Nothing Personal and Twist the Knife, or any of the generic stat traits that can fuel you with Critical Strike ideally. Opting for either of the 2 builds will sacrifice your performance in the other field, which is probably the biggest weakness Assassination has, especially in front of Outlaw. Yet once you choose one way, it's very hard to be outperformed by other specs in that specific situation, let alone Outlaw. There are of course more things at play here, but we will keep that for another time since each spec has its own layer of nuances you can explore and master by playing it long enough and smartly enough. And speaking of things that are smart, let's now talk about the not account wide essences and talk about the notification bell instead. You need to press it to appease the YouTube's algorithms. Please. But we will still have to talk about not account-wide essences anyway, so brace yourselves. And hope you played Rogue last patch. If not, sit down, cause we need to talk. As far as majors are concerned, the best in-slot option is Blood of the Enemy by far. It performs amazing in raids, funneling crits and a lot of general damage into your Vendetta window. Ideally. It's also useful in AoE raid fights where shit moves around a lot. Why? Well, because there is an alternative to this one, which is World Vein Resonance, where you have to stand still to take advantage of it. Even if agility is kinda bad, the amount you get from World Vein is enough to put it ahead of a lot of other essences out there. The downside is that the spikes that spawn require you to stay in range of them, so you figure it out. For single target miners, go with Memory of Lucid Dreams, Conflict and Strife, and Breath of the Dying, the new kid on the block. Breath is simming higher than most essences, even at rank 1. Memory is a simple energy refund which is kind of needed in single target, while Conflict and Strife is a flat versatility buff that can never go wrong. When doing dungeons and generally AoE content, yes, that can mean raids too, Blood of the Enemy Major is still the best option, but you can replace it with Meme Beam as one of the easiest essences to obtain. The minors will be similar as for single target with Memory of Lucid Dreams, Breath of the Dying, and Conflict and Strife. You can actually replace Conflict with Purification Protocol, which performs amazingly in AoE situations at the expense of the extra tankiness that the versatility would have given you, of course, so, you know, choose wisely. For the single target fights, trinkets, the current best in slot that could change in a few months are Ashvane's Razor Coral and Ajara's Font of Power from, yes, you guessed it, last raid. The powerhouses that are these trinkets outshine most, if not all, 8.3 alternatives. Don't forget that they can still Titan Forge, so if you decide to go to farm them, that's not that bad actually. Alternatively, you can go with the Vita Charged Titan Shard from Ra Den and the Torment in a Jar from Zanesh, which is an AoE trinket, but a good one, and since most of the raid fights have multiple targets at one point or another, this will perform pretty well. If you mainly do dungeons or simply look for replacements mostly for AoE but single target alike, go with Harlan's Loaded Die and Deadeye Spyglass. Both are good sources of critical strike and some of the best passive trinkets you can get, considering you can potentially spam Freehold and Sigil Borealis for them for ever. Not really, but you know, kinda like that. Torment in a Jar will still be one of your best AoE damage trinkets if you don't mind popping in the raid for it, while Lustrous Golden Plumage from King's Rest is a massive versatility on-use trinket that can fit into a DPS burst window. 8.3 and the raid specifically comes with some weapons that can guarantee Corrupt, and Assassination Rogue gets one that's better than most. Shard of the Black Empire drops with the Twisted Appendage Corruption, which is still one of the strongest single target options out there. Not the strongest though. That's about it actually. The other corruptions you want will have to be random and not nerfed by Blizzard. Right, Ian? Right? Infinite Stars is still the best mathematically single target choice here. The reason I say this is that it procs randomly on a random target that you hit, adding a stack damage increase debuff. So clearly, if you are fighting more than one target, the debuffs can be spread or stolen more likely, and instead of each Infinite Stars doing more and more damage, you will just have average wet noodles hitting everybody. However, Gushing Wounds will be one of your strongest single targets and the most damage you will ever get per corruption point. It only has one tier, but if you manage to stack it, oh boy. And we already mentioned Twisted Appendage before. Moving it on, Twilight Devastation will be your best and right now only AoE option. Other stat increases corruptions can be good depending on what gear you have, what your actual stat distribution is, and so on. You should probably sim them, but if they aren't taking the spot of any aforementioned corruptions, you should be good enough to wear them. When using the Master Assassin talent and no Shrouded Suffocation trait, clearly, the opener starts with you mutilating to 4 or 5 combo points. Pop a Rupture, mutilate again, use Garrote when out of Master of Assassin window, mutilate again to 4 or 5 combo points, pop Vendetta and Toxic Blade, use Vanish, Envenom, mutilate to 4 or 5 combo points again, and Envenom one last time. This particular opener uses the Master Assassin to its max and works amazingly when stacking double dose 3 times. With enough crit, one mutilate should be enough to transition you instantly into a finisher. If you run the Shrouded Suffocation trait and the Subterfuge talent, here is the fun opener. Start with Garrote, then a Rupture, Garrote again, then Vendetta, Toxic Blade next, Envenom, mutilate for 4 combo points, Envenom, Vanish just after the Garrote runs out, then Garrote twice. A few explanations here. When you do a Garrote from stealth, it gets buffed from the stealth and the Azerite trait. The Subterfuge talent lets you Garrote for 3 seconds after stealth, usually meaning 3 GCDs. The empowered Garrote is so strong that you want it to drop before reapplying it, since reapplying it with a lesser Garrote will override the empowered bleed ticks, making you lose damage. Any other Garrote you can easily refresh in its pandemic window. Lastly, the reason you Garrote twice after you vanish is 1 for the empowered Garrote and 2 for the combo points, since these 2 will easily put you into a finisher right away. When you need to build combo points, prioritize keeping Garrote up, which you can do with just a little over 5 seconds remaining from the previous cast of Garrote to not waste its damage, or if an add or cleave target spawns, cast it on them. Cast Fan of Knives on 3 or more targets if you need to reapply poisons on them. Cast Fan of Knives on 4 or more targets as the best combo point builder in that situation. Otherwise, use Mutilates. Spending combo points on finishers, you want to make sure Rupture doesn't fall off and the rest are Envenoms. Nothing complicated here. Your cooldowns will be used on cooldown, with Vanish being the exception where you want to pair it up with Vendetta always. In AoE, to make it simple, you want to keep bleeds on enemies if they live long enough. Use Crimson Tempest to also apply bleed, and the default finisher if you're fighting packs large enough. The damage scaling is not very straightforward for Crimson, so it's best to either stick to Poison Bomb instead or test it yourself and see if or when you feel you gain damage by casting Crimson Tempest as opposed to envenoming your priority target. We want to do a special shout out to Missler, who helped us feedback and fact check our guide. He is currently the author of the Wowhead written guide, which you guys should check because it has more advanced tips that we couldn't cover in the guide, since we want to keep it quick and easy and accessible for you to start doing dungeons and raids. Speaking of more advanced things, you should definitely check the Ravenhold Discord and website, since they do have a lot more details for your rogue if you want to go more in depth about the spec, which usually comes with a lot of practice and comfort in playing Assassination. And of course, we cannot end the video without a special thank you to our Patreons and all of their support. Without them, we couldn't essentially keep these videos going with the level of quality and, you know, all of this that we do. So thank you very much, guys. And if you want to support us a little bit more, check the links down below. You'll be able to find our Patreon link, our merch link, and maybe there's something that you will like. Thank you very much for watching the video, and we'll see you in the next one.